Well, hello there. I've got a lot of videos to catch up on, and the aim is to have all 4 of the major videos uploaded this week. Slightly behind due to a busy last week. Now, obviously, I can only go off the highlights that I saw of this race because I wasn't in it, but the highlights were aplenty, and the reigning king was back on top 2 Sundays ago on July the 17th. After a comfortable lead thrown away by Sean L at the fatal freeway chicane, Wes 7 was the one to pounce, closely followed by Frinker, and around lap 14 it was a 3-man battle for the lead, hence the competitive conditions. Now this all came about because of a blazing fast lap time, the only 1:26 of the weekend, nearly a second faster than the rest of the division. Frink was absolutely on fire, and that really helped him to catch up to Wes and Sean L. But ultimately, it was a bad landing from Wes before the final corner that caught him by surprise. He didn't look to be running slow, so he didn't move to defend, and Frink just dashed up the inside, and by the time they came around turn 1 on lap 19, Frink suddenly found himself in first, having passed the final pit stoppers such as Jodkieff and Uchier, then went on to win, with Wes falling back, having pushed too hard on the final lap. The tailgater, by all accounts, did not have the raw pace to score fastest lap of this weekend, especially against the Gauntlet and the Burger Shot Stallion, but the speed that car gets when it short shifts over the bumps, combined with one of the best traction stats in the entire game, meant that Frink was able to pick up the 5 bonus purple points as well with his blistering lap. And that's an important result for Uchier because he was leading the overall standings coming out of last race, and he really needed a good result in order to try and hang on to that. And coming from the back and finishing 5th with a very late pit stop just behind Jodkieff is a fantastic way to do it. So we'll see in the overall standings whether he's been able to hang on to that, because Frink didn't score very well in race 1. Don't really have a lot of information as to how MC West, Mike, Charles and G-Gamer did, but just based off the others' performance, I'm guessing that each of those 4 had one major crash, which set them back into those positions, because the top 5 ran relatively consistently. And as for 10th place, Nima 95, well, I was desperately looking for a reserve for Nima, and it was El Mister who volunteered on the Nodo Slack chat. I was trying to convince him to join, and once he'd given the track a test run, he was keen on doing it. He liked the track. There's another little plus for you, Evil Tunic. And we got El Mister in, and what a result he's had to keep Nima in Division 1. I'm sure he'll have been very pleased about that. Now, there was one rather controversial moment where Oracle XR and UFO Driver were battling onto the freeway on the final lap. Now, you know the dreaded chicane that approaches next, and El Mister had the best run of all of them, slotted himself into the middle of both of them, and suddenly we had a 3-wide moment. Who's going to let go? Who's going to back off? Well, none of them did. It was just a case of Oracle being on the outside, trying to push in, squeezed all 3 of them together. UFO Driver was on the inside. He had no line whatsoever with El Mister and Oracle on his right, but still he kept his foot in. And in the words of Oracle, they all just put their heads down and were like, YOLO! And the result was the result. And that ended up with Oracle having a pinball effect into El Mister, having a pinball effect into UFO Driver, who took the brunt of the impact and ended up spinning off into the wall, and that's partially the reason why he's been relegated. Dropping from 10th to 12th is never a good situation on the very last lap, but that's just the way it turned out, and El Mister secured the position for Nima, so thank you, El Mister. Don't really know what happened to Macy. He hasn't released his highlights video yet, so it's pretty unknown as to why he's dropped all the way back down to 13th. A quick note on UFO Driver. He actually had quite a decent position in hand, and the only reason he found himself battling with Oracle at the back near the end is because he ramped up one of the freeway barriers, tried to respawn, thinking that he was going to go outside of the circuit and wouldn't be able to get back in. Then he sort of started to bounce back into the circuit, so he let go of his triangle button, and of course that meant he got out of the car instead of respawn, and things just got even worse. So it's a shame that UFO Driver finds himself so far down. He shouldn't have been, but there we are there. met Ryan. I remember him getting spun out just a little bit at turn 1, and I think this set him at the back from an early stage, and he just wasn't able to mount any kind of comeback by the looks of it. He must have had too many chokes, and realising that he was under threat of being relegated, well, I imagine he just gave up. Ryan is a little bit too quick to give up, in my opinion, sometimes, and this is one of the first times we've seen him fall to Division 2, so it's going to be interesting to see how he handles it. Must have been a disastrous race for him. On top of that, Dr. Pepper's disconnected, so he picks up all of his bonus points, but is going down to Division 2 as well. God, it's already taken me Monday and Tuesday just to record the Division 1 commentary. I really do ramble on too much, and that's just testament to how busy I am right now. I did say I wanted to get all 4 videos out before the weekend, so it's going to be a bit of a push now. Right, Division 2. This was my race, as you've probably seen from the highlights. I have to say I was a little surprised to not get the purple points for this race. I felt like I had a good lap, but then after watching Frink's video, I saw that there were some lines that I was missing out on in the gauntlet that probably could have given me a few extra tenths. So it shouldn't be that surprising that a guy like Defiance Wires was able to just pip me in the fastest lap department. I was right behind him and we were just a few tenths ahead of everybody else. For example, drivers like Picano were just relying on their natural ability and no practice to get promoted here. As you saw in the early stages, we were able to close up to Picano relatively easily. Unfortunately, I did have that incident with him where I span him, but fortunately he was able to hold on to his position. He only lost out to Watty. Watty did take quite a quick pit stop. It was just a fraction under 9 seconds, I'd say, so he's been given a warning about that because it may have affected his final result with Picano. It was very tight between them, and I don't know how Manny dropped from 5th to 6th. I'm guessing that Crowgamer was one of these early pit stoppers and he just put in the laps in the very early stages of the race so that by the time Manny came round to pit, Crowgamer got the jump on him. Either way, he's done a great job to get back into Division 1. Crowgamer is the perfect example of a driver that just fluctuates between Division 1 and Division 2 depending on how his day goes. This was a good day for him and he's back up there. Now we had Evil Tunic reserving digs to pop, and it was Evil Tunic's track. He actually got himself into Division 2, so he's proving already before he even gets there that he belongs in Division 2 and he can quite clearly hang. I mean, we're talking about drivers like BC Eagles Guy and Headshot here. How long has Headshot been in Division 1? And now we see him struggling in Division 2, so quite a turn of fortune for Headshot these days. Even Ishan826 was able to step in, reserving for Scrayzor92, who was on holiday during this race, and he accepted the invitation last minute and he was able to put in a better performance than Headshot, who's usually so consistent in these sorts of races, so it really is gloomy days for Headshot at the moment. Things were looking even gloomier for Dylan though, who was basically participating in his retirement race here. The last race he wanted to take seriously before dropping out of competitive racing for a while, and it was partially due to the amount of takeouts that happened to him because he had a nice starting position, and you saw in my highlights that Mini Temper, unpracticed, went barreling into him, which sent him into a spin, and that was unfortunately one of the deciding factors of Dylan's race. But Mini Temper took it even worse. He had a horrible race and I think he even just dropped out or disconnected. Either way, he's finished last in those who score points, whereas Jakey had a very similar race to the race 8 of Division 3, where he spent the entire time complaining. God, I'm gonna have to mute you, Jakey, if it goes on like this, because your head just, if the more you complain, the more mistakes you're gonna make, because your head's just not in the game whatsoever. You've really got to find that sort of mental fortitude to refocus and try and get at least a few positions back, because if you just sort of give up, you'll never make it back into the race. So let's see if you can turn that negative pessimism into a more optimistic attack next time. Don't know what the hell happened to Mo Youngstar, but the bigger story is Crazy Chris 98, who everybody had their sights set on because his reserve didn't show up. What a letdown. So yeah, there you go. You can just suddenly score 0 points, even if you wanted to take the league seriously. It's going to be a real climb now for Crazy Chris to get back into this from Division 3 once again, just because his reserve was unreliable. So just please make sure that when you organise this with someone else, make sure that they're ready to go. Division 3 was pretty busy, but with 2 reserves finishing in the top 6, that meant promotions stretched all the way down to 7th place. So Racing Benji's been the big winner from all of that, finishing 7th and still getting into Division 2. But that's all good because active drivers should be rewarded. Basically, the steak sauce was on pole, and a few corners in, he threw it all away. I think he did well to hang on to 5th, judging by how far back he fell. He just wasn't in the game at all, but he did manage to clutch 5th. Meanwhile, Gaming Easter Egg, who got through the incident at the start, ended up in 2nd right off the bat and was able to put in a fairly dominant performance to get 1st there. The fastest lap actually went to one of the reserves, Anadraps, reserving for Rene Fun, but from the active drivers it was FBIS Sosa, so congratulations to him for getting a decent lap in the Felon GT, faster than the Gauntlet, but nowhere near Frink's incredible tailgater time. Evil Tunic had things go his way on his track as well, and this is quite a big result for him because if you remember, he's tied for 1st in the overall standings, so to score big even in a Division 3 race is important for him. Things just went really well for him at the start of the race. He was just able to avoid a number of incidents and suddenly ended up in 3rd. I rewatched his stream and El Mister was like, what a dream start, and he wasn't wrong. The only other big story coming out of Division 3 is the fact that www-Eurone's reserve, who was Indiana, finished 9th, but got himself a 10-second penalty for a pretty nasty lag takeout, I think. I'd have to go back and check that because I applied it at the time of the penalty, and he didn't wait, so he's gone and gotten Eurone relegated, although he should have finished 9th, so that's a bit devastating for Eurone, who's currently on holiday like Skrazor at the moment. He can't do anything about that. However, as it is, Eurone's asked to be taken off the grid anyway because he won't be back for a little while, if I recall correctly. It was good to see 80 Horse and I'm Awesome, who qualified from Division 4 in the previous week, stick around in Division 3, whereas on the other hand, unfortunately, Shady Fruit is heading straight back down to where he came from, so we'll say goodbye to Shady Fruit for now. Division 4 saw the debut of several new guys, including Kai Sachs and Jay Santos PT, who I thought were a sure bet on going through to Division 3, but I continue to be surprised by the results of Division 4. It was the debut of Marcel Wayne that shone the brightest, whereas Season 1 veteran Dawson proved that he could still go with the fastest lap. Of the active drivers, the real fastest lap was actually taken by Lano Lurenko, who was reserving for Golub Shreko. So that was a nice debut and sample drive from Lano Lurenko. Let's wait until he actually gets into Division 4, we'll see how far he can climb. Like I said, I expected guys like Kai Sachs to be right up there, but ultimately he was just outdriven in terms of consistency by guys like the Gonzo and It's Connor. Connor actually finished 4th, but received a penalty for toppling Jean over the barrier. Don't worry though, Jean wasn't exempt from penalties because he came crashing through some fences completely off circuit without checking his mini-map and took out somebody else as well, so that landed him a penalty for an unsafe re-entry to the track. Likewise, Kai Sachs got a penalty, so there were penalties going out all over the place. Kai Sachs got a penalty for a spin that he didn't wait for, I think. I realise I don't sound very sure about these penalties, but I can confirm they were reviewed and handed out a week and a half ago. It's just difficult for me to remember them exactly now. I can guarantee you that we should have seen Jilla 18J right up there at the top. That's Pak Mahad's other account, and there's no doubt in anyone's mind that he's a Division 2, if not a Division 1 driver, but his lag at the moment is absolutely insane. He was the cause of the calamity that you saw in the highlights video. His car was literally teleporting all over the track, swiping cars out. It was unreal, so thankfully he decided to bite the bullet and just quit out before he caused any more incidents on lap 2. As for eliminations, I'm just getting extremely harsh at this stage. If you don't show up and you don't say anything to me about a reserve, then you're just gone. So Got You Itch, Iggy, Haribo, Nus Nus Manel and Frezzies all gone. The waiting list is too full with keen drivers who are ready to go for me to worry about allowing drivers to stay. If you don't show up in Division 4, you run the risk of falling right to the bottom of the waiting list, especially due to last Sunday, which I'll talk more about in the next episode of the Rambling Recap. But there was a really poor turnout for Division 4, and really I should be filling those spaces with waiting list drivers. So that's the way I'll be going forward with this. A bit of a zero tolerance policy, because there are drivers who are taking part in the waiting list race who deserve their shot in Division 4, and maybe I'll be calling up drivers who are a bit lower down on the list to fill these spaces in future, because it's a bit unfair on a driver who's ready and willing to show up every single week to not have a spot for a couple of semi-active drivers. With that said, congratulations to the 5 of you who are going up, and now let's take a look at the overall standings. Can you believe he's held on for another week? That 5th position in Division 1 was just enough for Yuchia to hold on to his top spot for another week, and the other big climber is Defiance Wires, coming off the back of that strong Division 2 win. Obviously, Frink picked up those whopping 45 points for fastest lap overall and race victory in Division 1, and that has catapulted him right to the top of the standings once again. He's already a danger and a threat to steal that King of the Mountain title one more time. I should remind you at this time, once again, that this standings table is out of date because I'm recording this video quite late, and as of this moment, Race 3 on Push It to the Limit has already taken place. So these are the standings for after Race 2. If you remember, Sean L and I were somewhere down in the 30s, and yet, despite me getting second and him coming lower than second in his race, because he was in Division 1, he continues to outscore me in the overall points, and that's the importance of being in Division 1, because you can have a slightly worse race and still be ahead of your competitors overall. So that's why it's absolutely vital for me to get back into Division 1, and hopefully I won't disconnect anymore and I'll be able to stay there. Keep your eyes on 5th and 7th, because Evil Tunic, after his promotion, is now in Division 2, as is BC Eagles Guy, although he didn't get promoted in this particular week. They're still a threat, just hanging on there in 5th and 7th, mixing it up with the top guys thanks to strong results in their opening races. Apart from that, the other big names to keep your eyes on are probably Crazy Chris down in 26th, G-Gamer in 28th, and Picano down in 30th, having missed the first race. Those guys will all have decent starting positions should they make it to Division 1. Picano's now there, so he's going to have a great... He'll be on pole, of course, and he was for Push It to the Limit. Let's see what he can do with these kinds of race starts to start building those points up and start closing the gap to the likes of Frink and Yuchia. Will Yuchia be able to hold on? This is a serious challenge he's posing now, and he's taking this league very seriously. And you can see it in the way that he's driving. If you go and watch some of his performances on YouTube, he's really working his camera, he's picking his apexes, and he's playing the consistent game. Yuchia has got his head switched on. And I remember back to the early days on the PS3 when I first got into GTA 5. For me, it was always the objective to keep up with the 3, that being G-Unit, Picano, and Yuchia. And on any given day back then, Yuchia was right there with those two guys. And Yuchia can be a serious player, so let's see if he can really give Frink a run for his money. As for me, I'm going to have a decent starting position in Division 1 for the first time ever, so I'm looking to start closing the gap now. My objective is I'm going to be starting in front of everyone that's ahead of me in this table, and I don't want to let any of them pass me. That is the only thing I need to worry about. So let's see how that goes for the remainder of the season. I'm going to wrap things up there, so thank you for tuning into this episode of the Rambling Recap. Hopefully I'll have the next 2 videos uploaded before the weekend, along with track selection, vehicle selection, event details and grid, etc, etc. So, thank you guys, and good night for now.